tohi. He aka hoki e ngā mahi, e ngā rā, e ngā marama, nā te aheki mai ana. Amen nei. Right, welcome everybody. Especially I'd like to welcome Victoria Harwood as the replacement for Tony, or the new Tony. So I did say at the Civil Defence, I believe Tony did over 41 meetings, and it'll be very similar here. So welcome, Victoria. And I'm sure I don't know if you want a quick round, if you know the members here, you would know them all, Victoria, or would you like to have an introduction to them?
Kia ora koutou everyone, ko Victoria Harwood, toko ninga ingoa, po te aki hapori. So I've taken over from Tony Phillips as the Group Manager for Community Resilience. I think I do know the majority of people on the meeting today, so maybe if people are talking and they've not met me for the first time, maybe just give me a real short introduction. That would be helpful. And I also do have the meeting minutes from the last meeting you had, so I can see where people are represented from. So thank you, Rick, for the welcome. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Victoria. It's a little bit difficult to hear you, so can you hear me okay, everybody?
Yes.
Laura, thank you. So I can't see any hands up, so we'll carry on. Thanks, Victoria. And we're a very nice bunch in the RTC, so I think you'll enjoy them. Right, thank you. So I don't believe we've got any housekeeping issues, so I'm moving on to item 2 for apologies. And we have apologies from KDC, David Wills, Regional Council. David Wills has a KDC Council meeting today. Terry Archer is at Enviro Schools, and Jackie Horry Holt has put her apology in. So do we have any other apologies, please?
If I can interject, the
Yes.
road policing manager for the Northland Police, Anne-Marie Fitchett, she passes on her apologies. She's in a Waitangi meeting at present, so I'm filling in for her. So
Thank you. Thanks, Aidan.
no worries.
Any other apologies? So can I have a mover? I'll move those. Could I have a seconder, please? Greg, thank you. So Greg has seconded. Anybody against? Thank you. So I'm moving on to item 3, declarations of conflict of interest. If we take those as we go, that would be very good, thank you. Now I'm moving on to item 4.1, the confirmation of the previous minutes on page 4 of the agenda. Let's have a look. Right. Are there any correct? So it's page 5 of the agenda. I'll just quickly go through them. So page 5. Anything on page 5? Page 6. That's page 2 of the minutes, page 6 of our agenda. Page 3 of the minutes, page 7 of our agenda. And finally, page 4 of the minutes, page 8 of the agenda. So can I have a mover for those being a true and correct record? I'll move those. If we could have a seconder, please. Greg, thank you. Any discussion or on those minutes? I think everything else will come up as we go. Okay, thank you. Yeah, anybody against receiving those minutes? Thank you. 4.2, action sheet on page 9. What I would like to do with the action sheet is just quickly go through each item and take any discussion as we go. So can I have a mover for receiving the action sheet, please? Greg's going to move that. Thank you. And can I have a seconder? Anne. Thank you. Thanks, Anne. So we are now moving on to the action, and I am on page 10. So I have got, actually I can't read that, Laura. It's item 1 anyway. So is there any comment on item 1? Waka Katahi, New Zealand Transport Agency report to regional transport.
So, Chair, I think that's action number 2 on there.
Action.
Yeah,
It's not
that's,
coming up here.
that should be completed because a presentation on the state highway maintenance was provided to the RTC at the 13th of October meeting.
Thank you. Any discussion on that? Right. Item 4.
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if you can't see me on your screen.
Yes, I can see you.
Okay. The report, the Auditor General's finding report, I actually think it needs to be workshopped as part of a strategic session for the committee, if that could be diarised in the 2022 calendar year, so the committee can understand the challenges that we're facing on the network and any advocacy role that we might be required to take in regard to addressing any shortcomings or deficits we see in the network. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's a very good opportune time, Anne, to mention it. We have, I would like to, it is the last item on our agenda. It is the meetings for next year, but I emailed the elected members. I spoke to the RTC staff, and I've spoken to Steve as well. We would like the RTC to consider going to quarterly meetings as in civil defence. We can talk about that at the time, but I'd like you to have a think about it during the rest of this meeting. We would like to go to 4 meetings a year. Previous to the first 3 meetings, that would be March at this stage, we would have a workshop. So we would have a workshop prior to the RTC meeting for the first 3 meetings, and the 4th meeting of the year, which is the December meeting, would just be a straight RTC meeting. So we can address the strategic issues in the workshop prior to the RTC meeting, and then we would record any actions that we decide on in the following RTC meeting. That is my recommendation when we come to the last item. So I would like you to have a think about that as we go through the rest of the meeting, and that would address your issues, Anne, and it may address concerns of other members. So just briefly, we would go to 4 meetings a year. 3 of them would be preceded by a workshop, and the final one would just be an RTC meeting. So that's what I am proposing. And that is item 6.3 at the end. Right, thank you. So I'm going on to the next item. I believe it's item action 4. Any comment on action 4? It's completed. So I think we can carry on with action 5. Funding uptake. Chris, am I right? We will discuss that in the upcoming agenda items.
That is correct, sir.
Thank you. Unless anybody wants to talk about it now. You may have to put your virtual hand up because I'm not seeing some of those hands. 7, road safety update. That will also be covered in our upcoming
That particular action, Chair, the report has yet to be released, so it's just in progress.
Okay, it does say it's 6.1, but okay, thank you. Thank you. Item 8 then. So I'm moving on to page 11.
I had my hand up, Mr. Chairman.
Is that you, Anne?
Yes, I tried to raise my hand.
I need it. Yeah, thank you.
I did click on it, but it didn't come up. Item 8.
So you're on item 8 now. You're on item 8, the bottom of page 10. Okay.
Yep. That there won't be a formal outcome in the next year for the Auditor General report. Waka Katahi have already started working on the recommendations in the report and will provide regular updates to the Auditor General. Again, Mr. Chairman, I would like this matter to be workshopped. The committee is mindful that 90% of forecast revenue for the next 3 years has been clawed back to address cost overruns in the previous 3 years, and this has had a significant impact on the delivery of the National Land Transport Plan, which was saved at the 11th hour by a cash injection from the Crown. Moving forward, this committee needs to understand the implications of funding and planning to manage the network in light of the Auditor General's recommendations and the current funding model. So I'd like this matter to be workshopped. Thank you.
Thank you. So My suggestion is we list those, Laura, as agenda items, and we will bring those to the, so we should have 2 now for the first workshop, and if we agree to the March meeting. Okay? Thanks, Anne. So action 9, page 11, top of page 11.
So I think that can be completed now, Chair.
Good.
It'll be workshopped as Anne has suggested, which I support.
Brilliant, thank you.
Action number 10 can also be marked as completed. It was picked up as part of the RTC presentation last month, or October.
Thank you. Item 11.
Completed. I gave an update at the RTC on that, so it's completed.
Thank you. And 12.
So it is closed. I also provided an update at the time where we, Waka Katahi has consulted on improvements to the driver license system, and the government has real interest in accessibility and equity of the driver license system, and we recognise that there is an issue. And we're working through that. It's a public service, but is delivered through commercial systems, which brings its challenges. So the next steps is design a driver license strategy, and that work actually commenced yesterday with an internal workshop. So it's very much on top of our radar as a high priority. We're working with MSD in Northland as well around looking at some trials that we can implement in the short to medium term.
Thank you. Anne, you happy with that?
I'm finding this format a little challenging. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. We're moving at a rapid pace and I'm trying to read and manage the screen at the same time. So apologies if I missed something that Steve said there. The rural drivers licensing, testing and mentoring in Northland. I don't want that to become captured in a national approach. The challenges that we have in Northland are bespoke to Northland. So I want that, I do notice it says not started. I do want that to stay on the radar so that we can have oversight and input where required. And I understand that Nicole is working on that. So just want to keep that one on the action sheet and top of mind for now. Thank you.
So, Chair, just to give Councillor Court some confidence as well, is that I'm meeting regularly with the Northland Regional Commissioner, Eru, around this particular issue. It's very much a focus of Waka Katahi and Northland iwi and hapu to make sure that we, and MSD, that we resolve this.
Thank you. So, Anne, would you, I don't think that needs to go on the workshop list. You happy with that?
Doesn't need to go on the workshop list, but I don't want to see it drop off the action sheet.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So that would take care of, sorry, I was conscious it was 3 pages of action sheet, so I was moving along reasonably quickly, Anne. Sorry about that. So 12 and 13, that would be, that 13 will be covered as well. It is completed anyway. So if we go to item 17.
Sorry, Rick, can I just ask?
Oh, sorry, Victoria, I didn't see your hand.
Just on what's, try again. Right, sorry about that. Just on the rural driver license testing, is Steve mentioned about a meeting yesterday. Is it possible to get an update at all on what that was about or the outcomes of that meeting, or for next time? Or has there been a meeting with the police?
This was just an internal strategy session. Waka Katahi is a complex organisation. This was about bringing the right people together within our organisation to make sure we find the problem. It was a national focus, but as I said, Northland's moving quite quickly in terms of our focus with the particular issues in the far north, especially. So we're sort of ahead of the game a little bit, but I'm happy to give an update at the next RTC meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So, any comment on action 17, bottom of page 11, regarding review of the cost of 4-laning? Do we list that as a workshop item? Anne?
My understanding is that we're still waiting to receive a report from staff on the cost of the review of the 4-laning, and that will be taken to the Chief Executive and Mayoral Forum in the first instance. So an update on where that's at would be appreciated.
Through the chair, at the last RTC meeting, we highlighted the difficulties of completing or even getting a price to undertake this work, given that the costings themselves relate to significant detailed design. I have spoken to Steve Mutton regarding how we may be able to approach this without reinventing the wheel and redoing the entire exercise. So we're just looking at how we can best approach it, but probably expect an update early in the new year on how we're able to do that. Keeping in mind that to undertake the costings, we would need access to all the entire detailed design work and the lights, which took an entire Waka Katahi project team many months to do. So we'd need to figure out how we can actually undertake that work. So we're still working on that, and I'm working with Steve Mutton to clarify how we might best be able to do that.
Thank you.
Got anything to add to that, Steve?
I mean, the only thing I can say, Councillor Court, is that I'm more than happy to be open and transparent around those costs. As with any large project within Waka Katahi, we have independent estimators that do parallel pricing reviews as well. And I'm happy to share all that information with Calvin and his team at the NTA. So that's undertaken by Bonds CM, which are New Zealand renowned estimators.
So I'm very happy with that, but it's very happy to have an update. Leave it on the action sheet, have an update, the first meeting next year. And is that hand up to ask a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not looking for the detailed business case. That is a huge amount of work and a huge amount of cost. What we were looking to do is have an independent peer review. So the minister's rationale, you recall I talked to the committee at the time. The challenge was the minister's rationale for removing it from the list. And that is the peer review that I am looking to revisit. I haven't refreshed my memory in advance of today's meeting, so I'm really dredging the memory cells at the moment to remember what I spoke to. But the minister had a significant long list of projects, and they were moderated down based on a whole bunch of what we considered to be out of the box indicators. So he considered things like rail emissions. I'm going to stop at that point because I don't want to embarrass myself nationally while this has been live streamed. So I have to go away and reread my report. But I don't want a detailed breakdown of all the costings, and I don't want anybody wasting their time and turning their mind to that level of detail. It's very much a high level revisit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Anne. And Andy.
Yeah, I think I'll just, through the chair, echo Councillor Court's view. I don't think it was a detailed review of the costings. It was a review of the business case and justification that the committee was looking for to just test the ministers and central government thinking around removal of the 4-laning. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that. I think we're happy with the update in March. That would be perfect. So I'm now moving on to top of page. Well, I've got 18 and 19 completed. So if we go to 20, action 20, Councillor David Wills, and I see that Calvin has followed it up with Andy Brown. So David's not here. Calvin, do you want to say anything on this item?
Through the chair, Waka Katahi is still finalising the last of their low cost, low risk program. So we've got an action requesting for an update on that once that program is finalised. So we'll update Councillor Wills on that once we receive the outcome.
Thank you. Item 21, Steve, I'll let you speak to that. Seeing the RTC had not received a report on the 1st to the 12th. Have you got any comment on that one?
Yes, so I understood that was completed. I sent a note through to NCORP on the 9th of September. The reason why they were not included was that when the RLTP was being developed, there was an understanding that walking and cycling improvements would be eligible funding under the NLTF. However, during moderation, it was decided that off-road shared paths that were primary for recreational use would not be eligible for NLTF funding. That's quite a robust moderation process, which has independent subject matter experts. So it is a robust process that's followed as part of that, but it's outlined in an email that I sent through to Council Court.
Thank you. Anne, happy with that? Yep.
No, I'm not happy with that, Mr. Chairman, and the reason I'm not happy with that is because our walking and cycling program actually included footpaths. So the committee will be mindful that the Minister indicated that multimodal would receive a more favourable analysis by the board when they moderated the regional land transport plans into the National Land Transport Plan. Now I can understand the debate for off-road recreational, but in the far north, as was the case for nearly all of the rural and provincial sectors, we lost our footpath funding in its entirety. And I do not think that was acceptable. And at the time when we asked the question why that was, the answer was it was based on numbers. So rural and provincial in New Zealand who do not have alternative mode share, we don't have public transport, we don't have Ubers, we don't have trains, we don't have ferries, we don't have all of those other traditional mode share that metros have. We are relying on cars. And so if we're going to change driver behaviour, we're going to meet the Minister's objectives to reduce climate change emissions, we need fair and equitable access to funding, and rural and provincial New Zealand was denied that. So I don't wish to let that matter drop at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. I certainly, I think we all feel that in the north. So well laid out. Thank you. Should we, just looking at it, don't want to get too much on our first, but that is definitely a strategic item. So I think we could further discuss that at our first meeting in March, Anne. And so Laura, we would add that to our agenda for that pre-meeting workshop. Happy with that, Anne? Thank you. And hopefully it'll be in person then, and I'll be able to bring the boxing gloves. So, you know, it's always good to do that, isn't it? Right. So we're moving on to item 22. That 22 and 23 are completed, and then the last item, 24. This is yours, Anne. And I'm not sure what there's no comment on that. So is there any update on that? Well, I think that's done, isn't it?
It has been done, so the graphs and
there's just no comment in the box, that's all.
Yeah.
So that's done?
Correct.
Thank you. Anne, happy with that? Tis got your name next to it, but there's no comment in the...
I think it's a lesson to all of us when we talk a different language to the public. We always need to stop every now and then and just double check that the public can actually understand what it is we're saying. So thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks very much. Thank you. That was good discussion on the action plan. So we have moved 3 items into our first workshop, and we have corrected some others, and we have left others on the action plan. So thank you all. That was good discussion. I'm now moving on to page 13, item 5.1, Regional Land Transport Plan. I'll start off with, mover for this, please. Item 5.1. Anne, and I will second. Laura. So it's open for discussion, and we'll just give Chris a chance to talk first, and then we'll have any comments. So Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, we take the report as read and the attached spreadsheets. The one thing I would like to raise is you will notice that the forecast expenditure columns are still blank. Those will be completed with the various road controlling authorities, ourselves and Waka Katahi by the 17th of December. So at the next meeting, you will have all the forecast expenditure included. I'm going to ask Greg for a bit of help, maybe Calvin. I think there are some the work categories that have still yet to have their funding confirmed fully, and how this will be affecting the work going forward. I see that was one of the actions raised by Councillor Court before, or the RTC, as to how this the delay in the funding will be impacted. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Just through the chair, adding
Yes,
to
Calvin.
Chris's point. So we're papers went to each of the 3 district councils through late October, early November, confirming the funding outcomes with recommendations of how to allocate any surplus local share. Those papers and recommendations were approved, and subsequent to that, we've now been finalising the program. And this is aligned with the messaging that we've been providing to councils since the knowledge of the delayed funding, or the funding announcement coming into the financial year, was known. And that is, we're pulling together 3-year programs across the period of the NLTP, or the LTPs. Noting that in the CapEx space, there will be projects that were originally earmarked for year 1 that will carry forward through to year 2. However, these are going to be reported through to each council over the coming months in terms of the 3-year program. And Greg's put the first of those papers together for Far North Council meeting next Tuesday, as I understand it.
Thank you, Calvin. So this column will be finalised on December the 17th, the forecast expenditure, and we won't see a copy of this until our next meeting. Is that correct? Or is it available if anybody wanted to have a look at it before then?
Through the chair, once we've received all of them after the 17th, then I'll complete the sheets, and if anyone wants copies of them, they're more than welcome, or they'll come out at the next meeting.
Would anybody like a copy before, or are they happy to wait until the next meeting? I'm looking at Anne and Greg. They're only elected ones on at the moment. You happy to wait, Anne and Greg? Yep. Okay. Thanks for that, Chris. Perfect. Steve, did you want to comment at all?
I can give an update when I talk about Waka Katahi later on.
Thank you. Perfect. I did talk to you about that. So are there any other questions on the financials, please? I can't see any hands. So we have our mover and seconder. I will only ask if anybody's against receiving that report. Thank you. So now I am moving on to page 19, item 6.1, Northland Road Safety Update. And I would like a mover for that, please. I will move that, actually, the safety report. Anne is a seconder. So we're open for discussion following Ian, if Ian would like to comment first. Thank you, Ian.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if we could take the report as being read. If I could also just update the current national and local crash stats, and I think the police, Hayden, when he does his update, he'll give the police district perspective, and now just to confirm, our figures will be a little bit different because the police district's different than the Northland region, but the ministry hasn't updated their figures overnight yet, but based on midnight 06 of the 6th of December, the figures are sitting at 296 deaths nationally. I believe that will increase because there was some fatal crash or two yesterday down the country. Also, Northland's currently sitting on 29, and at the same time last year that was 28. But if there's any other queries anyone might have in relation to the report, if they could ask at the end. But if I could now pass on to Hayden, who's filling in for Anne-Marie. And also, Hayden, not to put you in the deep end, but do you want Laura to bring up that presentation, the police presentation?
Yep, definitely being thrown in the deep end here. In terms of statistics and the like, so I don't have them at my fingertips. I do have the local sort of fatal crash information, but yeah, if we do have a police presentation, it may help.
Awesome. Thanks,
Just
Hayden.
bear with me. I'll get that up in a minute.
Thanks, Laura. We'll go straight to that, are we? Laura?
Just pulling it up now.
Yep.
Hey, thanks,
Thank
Laura.
you. I don't think it's going to be an interesting time in the next 10 days, isn't it? That's for sure. Right. So Hayden can't operate that, can he, Laura? You've got to do it, do you? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think I can only view what's on the screen.
So you've just got to ask Laura to change it, that's all.
Yeah, so
Thank
look,
you.
I'm looking at this for the first time as well,
Oh,
unfortunately.
okay.
So,
No problem.
So yeah, like the current Northland Road toll, as far as I'm aware, there's been 24 recorded fatal crashes and 26 deaths. So that includes sort of the whole of the Northland district. Obviously, that doesn't include the injury-causing accidents, which are, of course, a cost on social and also financial for a lot of the different government agencies. But there we go. We're sitting currently 26 on the board, 25 on there. And are you guys looking for an update in terms of the upcoming December the 15th date?
I certainly, I think everybody would appreciate it.
Yeah,
definitely. What, you know, sort of what's happening, and well, yeah, your general feeling about the whole thing, I guess.
Yeah, so the information that I have available, so December the 15th, midnight, the borders are opening between Auckland and Northland. We, as police, are being resourced nationally. The figures I understand it to be a 73 staff going to be provided by Police National Headquarters to supplement Northland staff in the execution of the my understanding 2 checkpoints. So one to be State Highway 1 and one to be sort of Mangataroto area, which will cover off the main ways into Northland. I'm not sure exactly what has been confirmed. We're still in the stage of arranging all the sort of technical details in terms of staffing numbers, the exact locations, but from my understanding, there's going to be a 5-day period of constant 24-hour checkpoints, and then that's going to become sort of mobile, still same numbers of staff, but it's just my understanding it's going to be a big issue in terms of numbers of vehicles travelling north, and also running at the same time as the Northport operation with the cargo being unloaded from the cargo ship at Northport. So we're going to have southbound traffic and northbound traffic heavy during that time.
Are we going to keep, would you like to take questions as you go, Hayden, or
Yeah, look, you've hit it on the head there. I've been thrown in the deep end. I've been slotted into this position this week, so I'll do the best that I can. But questions as we go are probably the better way to approach this.
Okay, then. So, do we have any questions? I can only see 6 people on my screen at the moment, Laura. But can you see? Anne, you've got a question.
Sorry, I couldn't figure out how to unmute when I couldn't see my smiley face. 5-day period of constant checks. I'm just not really clear if that means we're going to be stopping every single vehicle and every single vehicle is going to be checked, and what this means in terms of road safety. Parking the politics of this to one side, I'm purely focused on road safety. Because we could have long queues of cars, we could have increased driver frustration, we could have people rat running. I'm assuming we've got that covered. And I'm not quite sure what the sergeant meant by the compounding by the cargo ship unloading. Is this one cargo ship, so it's one day and we can manage that? Or is this an ongoing issue that we need to be alive to over the period of the border controls? And he might not be able to answer because, as he said, he's been chucked in the deep end too, but just a bit more clarity I think would be helpful. Thank you.
So, Anne, I just see Kelvin put his hand up there, so shall we excuse me, go to Kelvin first?
I was just going to raise through the chair, there was a press release issued yesterday on these checkpoints that I know was circulated by NRC Civil Defence. But within that, it provides the 2 proposed locations being State Highway 1 at Uretiti and State Highway 12 near Mangarodo. But there is mention within that press release about the methodology and queue management and the likes, Councillor Court. So I'm happy to forward that through to the elected members so they can see what that was if they haven't yet seen it.
Thank you. And Steve, you had a comment as well, did you?
Yes, question for Hayden. So kia ora, Hayden, Steve Martin.
Right.
The our focus is obviously keeping Northland safe and getting the COVID checkpoints in place, but I'm also interested around our ability to deliver against our targets around the RIDs. So obviously a lot of your resources are tied up around these checkpoints, but it's important we continue to meet our Northland targets around speed, restraints, et cetera, So could you just talk about that and what plans you've got in place to hit those targets? Because I do note that we are significantly below our target areas. Thank you.
Just loading up the list here. Are there any other questions you want me to cover off?
I don't think there's any other questions. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll just start. I know, someone's mentioned that there was a document that's been released in relation to the checks, but we'll just start off with the container ship. So my understanding, we've got a one-off container ship with about 1,500 containers that will be landing in Northport. There is an operation underway that obviously the 1,500 containers will have to be transported by road. Nationally, our commercial vehicle safety team are providing a number of staff who will be looking at the safety of the vehicles involved in that transport and just making sure there's no issues on our transport network. That's not going to be tying up our local road safety staff. This has happened in the past. There wasn't any issues. There are a few trucks that were identified as unsafe and were taken off the road. It's expected it'll probably be the same this time. In terms of the effect on the road users, there will be a large amount of heavy vehicles on the State Highway 1 network during that week. But it's expected that the first, I think, 3 or 4 days are going to be the busiest, and then it's going to taper off after that. It's not an ongoing, it is just the one-off week, and we can provide some details as to dates when that's going to start, if that does help. In terms of the actual checkpoints, the intention would be to check every vehicle. It is a COVID-19 checkpoint, so the idea would be to check for a vaccine pass. and or a negative test result. From what I've heard, some of the modelling suggests that the tail could be up to 45 kilometres long. Whether or not that's the case, we don't know. Obviously, traffic will be managed. We do have support as in terms of traffic management, traffic control, and this is what I'm talking about, the initial planning still going on. Whether or not every vehicle will be checked, given it's going to be 24-hour checkpoints, I dare say in the wee hours when there's only a few vehicles on the road, every vehicle will be checked. But if it's becoming an issue in terms of backlog, there will be, I guess, strategic flow of traffic implemented, and there may be random checks, vehicles getting pulled off the road to enable that flow of traffic and to minimise the flow and effects of having a checkpoint and a large tail. And with respect to the query about the RIDs being a priority, yes, they are. So we've been lucky in terms of our district commander has worked quite hard and has managed to get that 73 staff from a national pool. So the national pool will be providing the staff on these checkpoints, and they will be supported by local staff. In terms of our road policing teams, they will support that checkpoint, but their main roles will be to uptake their business as usual. So they will be concentrating their taskings on the road safety, the RIDs, and their normal duties. Hopefully that answers the questions.
Yes, I'm just looking at the report now. So is the exact time it starts, it is midnight on the 14th, is it, or midnight on the 15th?
I believe it's the midnight on the 14th coming into the 15th.
Midnight on the 14th, thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I thought it was. So checkpoints will start at midnight on the 14th of December.
Yes, yep.
It doesn't, I'm just trying to look on the report. I couldn't find it on the report.
So when they say the 15th, I believe it's as of 00 hours on the 15th.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm just looking at that. Okay, it doesn't say that on there. Thank you. So Chris, sorry, you've got a question?
Yeah, through the chair, could I just ask of Waka Katahi, are there any roadworks planned anywhere along State Highway 1 from Uritidi South or at the intersection at State Highway 12 along State Highway 12 during all this time that could exacerbate the problem?
Yeah, that's a good question, Chris. I'll have to come back to you, but my understanding is there's not. Our journey manager, Wayne Sharpland, is working very closely with police around this, but I'll double check with Wayne. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. A good question, Chris. And Kelvin, was that? Do you have another question, Kelvin?
Apologies, I hadn't put my hand down.
And Anne, do you have another question, or is that? You've got your hand up. No, okay. Thank you. So Hayden, we can carry on. Thanks very much.
Yep.
Thank you for the update. I think it's very important to get that for us to feel confident that we know exactly what's happening so we can answer the questions, because we've already had quite a few as individuals and as councils, I believe. So thank you for that.
And look, my apologies, I wasn't better prepared.
No, I understand it well. I think I've got it all now, so thank you. And, what can we say? But I think I totally agree with Anne. It's going to be a frustrating time for not only the motorists, but it's going to be a very frustrating time for police. So thank you.
Are we still wanting to talk about the statistics?
Are there any further? Are you going to go through? I'm actually going through the report ahead of you, so I'm just looking. Are there any questions on the statistics, or can we move on to the roads? Like, we have had the road safety buses before, but I don't think there's any questions, so we'll carry on. Thank you. So just before you go, Laura, if you probably can see everybody, I can't. So if you can just let me know if there's any hand up that I've missed. Is that okay? Thanks.
Yeah,
Right. Aidan, sorry, all yours.
All right. So look, just in terms of like the summer policing, the final plans haven't been released as of yet. The operations group just have a few things on their plate at the moment, but obviously it's going to be released in the next week or two. But the influx of Auckland into Northland isn't something new. It is expected to be a lot higher this year than it has been in the past. All the police activities are expected to continue as per normal in terms of our road policing, in terms of our what we call our summer policing. So looking at the sort of populous hotspots within Northland and just supplying sort of staff where and as when needed. So it is going to be an interesting time. But I think with the influx of the national staff and assisting with that COVID checkpoint is definitely going to take the weight off our shoulders as the Northland Police, and hopefully it is just business as usual for us. Yeah, look, in terms of the local stats, unfortunately, we can't police. I say police stupid. Like people make their own decisions. We just have to be at the right place and the right time to actually identify that, which I think we've probably pretty good handle on. And we're going to be amending our rosters and our locations of interest over this time period as well. So our road policing positions are nice and full at the moment. We've got full squads. We've got our high patrols. Just looking at the rural road stats there. Keeping an eye on the rural roads. We've got our sort of metropolitan road policing units, and we've got our district impairment teams as well, looking at the impaired driving for alcohol and drugs. We've set up, looking at this, I'm not sure if you're aware, but basically there's been a new district impairment team set up in the far north. So that's going to be obviously a big benefit coming over summer, sort of keeping the streets safe with the expected alcohol intake and possibly drugs. The Mid-North have their setups as well as Whangarei, Kaipara. So I think coverage within the district is looking pretty good for the summer.
Thank you.
Chris Powell has
All
his
right.
hand up.
Sorry, Chris. Thank you.
He would like to speak just about the buses briefly.
Sure.
Through the chair to Hayden and the New Zealand Police. Hayden, to you and your road safety partners, just thanking, congratulations on the buses. I know it's been many years in the making, and it's nice to see them there. So thank you very much indeed.
Yes, they're very, they're definitely in your face, those buses, aren't they? You can't miss them. Really
yeah, they have, Mr. Chairman, but I know that the police have fought long and hard for them, and it's nice to see them there. And just to say thank you for all their work and their road safety partner support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You. Thank you very much, Chris.
Yep, so we've increasing our network in terms of the static, not static, but the mobile van-based traffic camera operators. The idea is that there's going to be 3 operators in the Mid-North covering, I believe, the Mid and Far North, and 2 based out of the Whangarei station covering the Whangarei Kaipara area. They're going to be working pretty much throughout the early shifts and late shifts coming up into summer as well, just providing another facet of our road safety initiative there. So in terms of this, so basically Terry Phillips has been in this role now for over a year. I'm filling in for him until February next year. Thus the short term, here you go, here's a meeting, not provided with the information that I needed. Terry's actually moved into the new senior sergeant role in the Mid-North. So he's a substantive senior sergeant, will be running the Mid-North team. I'm not exactly sure what's happening in terms of the Whangarei Kaipara, but when it comes February, Terry will be in that full-time role, and there will be someone in this full-time role here. but there's Hayden Corrich is the senior sergeant looking after the Mid-North for now.
Good.
I guess if you're not aware, the new dragars that we used to have the handheld system where it would sort of indicate a level of alcohol, as in you're over, believed to be over 400 or not. You'd have to come back to a police station or a mobile bus and go through an evidential breath test on one of the big larger machines. We have a large number of these in districts now. They're personally issued to all road police members and members of the public safety teams as well. This handheld device is now our evidential breath test machine. So all roadside breath testing procedures can actually be carried out at the roadside without the need of returning to base. That's more important for the rural policing roads and also the mid and far north in terms of accessibility to a police station in terms of distance, but also with mid-north particularly, not all of them being 24 hours. So these devices increase our capacity remarkably in terms of identifying persons that are driving over the limit and also actually producing the evidence to prosecute. Alongside that, all our road policing teams and a lot of our public safety teams are now SIT trained. So that's the compulsory impairment testing. So that's identifying drivers who may be under the influence of drugs. We're pretty well enabled now to look after the road policing side in terms of impaired driving. And that's it.
Oh, thank you. So are there any other, look, that's excellent update. Thank you, Hayden. Any questions? So I just have one. So just to reconfirm, so with that, the Draga 7510, you do everything on site now, do you?
Yes, yep. So that will identify that they've been consuming alcohol. That will identify through the legislated steps. It'll identify that they've blown over 400 or between 200 and 400, and then we can actually get a precise reading in terms of an exact amount on that same device.
Great. That's going to save a lot of time, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Good on you. And Hayden, I just want to back up what Chris said. You it's looking really good. It's taken a long time to get those buses. We're really pleased with the extra support in Northland, I'm sure, not only for the safety campaign, but also the extra 73, I think it was, police for the roadblocks. So the message is definitely going out there, and I do believe that there's no excuse for people not to know that they're going to have long queues. Like that 45 kilometres is a bit frightening, but who said that, Anne, did she? It's a bit frightening. Thank you, and thanks again. And yeah, considering you were put on the spot, it's a fantastic report and answered the questions very well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We would, thank you, Hayden, and we will take the report. We have a mover and seconder, so I will just ask for anybody against receiving the report. No, none there. Thank you very much. So I'm now moving on to item 6.2 on page 31. And it's the Waka Katahi report, and I would like a mover to accept this report, please. It's Greg, and a seconder, Anne, thank you. And I will go straight to Steve to address it, and then we'll have questions. Thanks, Steve. Thank you, Laura, for bringing that up.
That was
okay.
Steve.
All yours, Steve. You're still on mute, Steve, sorry.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so just appreciate the time that you give Waka Katahi to give an update in terms of our focus in Northland. So just at a high level before I work through this presentation, Katahi's focus during this time continues to be delivering on the government's objectives, which is around the road to zero, around climate change, around the government policy statement, and of course delivering the NLTP, while navigating the COVID-19 challenges, and which is impacting us all significantly. So, it has been a real challenge for our staff, but it's good to see some of our key activities coming through. Just from a financials perspective, just at a high level to start with, the NLTF spends on budget, which is about 1.2 billion. The New Zealand Upgrade Program spend is only about 45% of the budget, so we are behind budget on that. But we're facing a lot of challenges in the NZ program, especially around the supply chain issues and escalating costs. The NLTF revenue, which normally comes through RUC and FED charges, that's down 14% already, and we're going to be reforecasting the NLTP in Q2 due to all those impacts on COVID. And we're still working with Treasury around finalising the facility terms of that $2 billion loan, which I know I've talked to you before about that. So when you focus in on Northland, all projects are progressing well, considering there's been an underspend obviously this quarter due to the COVID-19 impacts, namely around those resource constraints, supply chain issues, and the impacts that the border controls are having on getting resources north. But we do expect to be able to recover this in this next 3-year period. From a maintenance and operations perspective, we're currently spent 6.9 million against a year forecast of 45 million. You need to take in mind there that the real construction season hasn't really started until this month, so we'll see us catch that up over as a real S-curve, our M&O financials for the year. We've got 135 kilometres of programmed activity for pavement and surfacing renewal, but once again, we're only just starting that work now. I'll just move into the presentation.
Steve, I just thought thanks for that update. Very good on the funding update. Just thought we might take questions on that before we go on to the rest of your report. Just if there are any quick questions. Laura, do you see any hands up? Anne.
Just in regard, thank you, Mr. Chair. Steve, thank you for that. That was really great. My question is in relation to reforecasting the NLTP in Q2. You talked about revenue being 14% down, supply chain challenges, and a number of other things. What is the implication on that reforecast? What is the implication of the reforecast on the delivery of the Northland work program?
So I don't believe it'll have any impact on the Northland program. The Northland program is reasonably small compared to other parts of New Zealand. So the real challenges will be, for instance, where there's large programs such as Auckland, if I can use that as an example, where we've got a significant program not only for Katahi, but the biggest program that Auckland Transport's ever delivered. With the COVID slowdown, obviously we're not burning the cash like we forecasted, but then we're not getting the revenue, so it's offset quite nicely. But we just need to relook at that and relook at our forecast to make sure that they're realistic.
Thank you. Andy.
I'll mute Andy.
To the chair. Steve, you mentioned that you're seeing escalating costs. Is this through the tender box, and have you done any work around quantifying what that looks like now and any trends so that the implications on delivery can also be reviewed? Thank you.
Yeah, so we're looking at that nationally, and obviously it's around the escalating costs is not only from the impacts of COVID, but also all the supply chain issues that we're seeing. So our procurement team is analysing all the information that we have. We're also working with our key providers to get a better understanding on what they're forecasting long term. But it's a real issue. When you talk to, like, for instance, some of our international project directors, such as Mr. Sweeney, who's delivering the CRL project in Auckland. When you put all those on top of each other, like I mentioned, rising costs, resource constraints, COVID, they've never seen anything like this around the world before. So it's certainly, they're using all their tools in their leadership toolbox to try and navigate these challenges. And we're really interested in working with our partners to understand these costs and what we can do going forward. But I think it's all about just balancing the program. As I say, that some projects are running late, which means we're not burning the cash, which means that we should be in an okay position.
All right, Andy. Thank you.
Thank you.
So no further questions. We'll go on to the Northland Report now. Thank you, Steve, for the update. Once again, thank you for that financial update. Thank you.
No problem. So just a few things I'd like to run through what's happening from a national perspective, because it does also influence Northland, and it's something that the RTC needs to be very mindful of as we look forward. So first of all, the Balangual traffic sign procurement. This is a big interest with Hapu and Iwi in Northland, and this is about enabling bilingual traffic signs to be used across New Zealand. And behind this mihi is the vision to continue the revitalisation of the language by seeing Te Reo Māori to be seen, spoken and heard wherever possible. And obviously we've been talking a lot with other places around the world and looked at international precedents. I don't know if you've travelled to Wales or Scotland, you'll see it absolutely and all their signs over there. So we're taking a lot of those learnings and we're working with our partners to establish a selection criteria and prioritise which signs will be enabled first. The kura, or the school sign, is one of the key things we want to do first, because that fits in our Road to Zero strategy. So we've got some consultation out there at the moment. There's some safety research available on our website, and you can make a submission online if you are interested. But certainly, if you've got any more questions around this, please come back to me. In terms of emission reductions plan, so the public consultation for this first emissions reduction plan is being led by the Ministry of Environment, and that's underway. And the plan really addresses the government's response to the recommendations from the Climate Change Commission, and the plan is going to be delivered in May next year. Transport is one of the key sectors identified in the plan, and we're going to have a significant role, I think, in supporting the transition to a low carbon economy for Aotearoa. And I think it's going to be a real challenge for us in Northland and how we achieve that. So Katahi is supporting the development of this plan through 3 strands of work. So there's the content development of the emissions reduction plan. There's also policy advice and support for transport packages, and the corresponding advice about what financial support may be required. Now, the draft transport chapter poses 30 packages of new work, which I think out of the 30, there's something like 26 and 4 with Waka Katahi. And I think the 3 main focus areas is around reducing reliance on cars and supporting people to walk, cycle and use public transport. It's about rapidly adopting EVs and low emission fuels, and it's about beginning work to decarbonise the heavy transport and freight. So obviously there's a lot of work in there. The way that we're treating this is that the focus areas and proposed packages all fit within an avoid, shift, improve framework that we've adopted to create that sort of sustainable land transport system. So this ASI framework basically prioritises transport policies that minimise the need for people to travel far from home for work and their day-to-day activities. So that's the avoid, which is people don't need to travel in the first place. The next one is the shift, as it encourages people to be more active or use public transport when they're moving around. And the last one is around the improve, which promotes safe, clean vehicles, including electric buses and vehicles. This model works really well in an urban environment, and it makes real good sense in terms of cities where you've got that mode shift options. Obviously, with Northland being a more regional network, there's some whole challenges around how we achieve these targets. And, I'd really like us to have one of our workshops really focused on this. Wakatahi's developed what I think is an awesome model where we can play with different levers and see what changes we can make with the land transport system around these 3 strategies: avoid, shift and improve, and you can see the carbon emissions and what that means to our climate action plans. So I'll work with the chair to make sure we get that locked in. So as an RTC, I really got to challenge us that we need to start thinking of future GPS and shift our focus to much more strongly on emissions reduction, because that is certainly the way of the future.
Thank you.
So te ake tu maya, so it's our regulatory strategy. And if you remember a couple of years ago, there was an incident that led to a report. It was back in December 2017. A vehicle was issued a warrant of fitness by an inspector at a licensed inspecting organisation. That vehicle was sadly involved in a fatal crash in early 2018. And the gentleman was a passenger of that vehicle when it crossed the centreline, crashed into a ditch, and his seatbelt failed, and he hit the windscreen and died as a result of his injuries some weeks later. So that, we obviously took that very, very seriously. And since that incident, we've accepted that Waka Katahi failed to prioritise public safety in relation to the incident. So we've absolutely stood up to that. We've accepted all recommendations put forward by, there was 2 reports that were put in place, and we reviewed our regulatory system, including our funding and fees. So we've developed a new strategy. It's a 10-year strategy which looks at 4 areas. One is around legislative change, and the strategy really reflects the requirements in the Land Transport Amendment Act, and also establishing a directive of land transport. And we're currently working through about being really clear about how that directive of land transport will perform the regulatory functions. There's the funding model. We need a sustainable funding model to support the required activities and improvements. We need to be much better aligned in our organisation around our activities delivered, as well as those activities delivered by our partners and our stakeholders. And we need to be really outcome focused across safety and security, which is including personal security, around be a lot more outcome focused in access and mobility, public health, environmental sustainability. So we have started developing an implementation plan around that strategy, and we've also started engaging with stakeholders, including Māori, local government, government agencies and industry. And if you'd really like to be involved in this and engage with us a bit more to understand the development and timing that works for you, please come back to me and I'll get you registered in terms of some of the workshops that are actually happening. So one thing I just mentioned was around the review of the regulatory funding and fees. So we've taken an 18-month comprehensive review of the funding and fees model, and it was actually first put in place in 2008. And basically, our current funding situation is that it's really unsustainable in the current way that we look at regulation, and they don't actually reflect the actual cost of providing regulatory services. So we've spent a lot of time looking at our new funding model, which will deliver improved compliance and safety outcomes, and it means that our regulatory functions are going to be properly funded, and that New Zealanders will meet the cost of regulation fairly and with the right people paying for the right things. So this is a fundamental shift, and I think it's really going to help us deliver that. So a lot of the cost will actually go back to commercial operators rather than hitting our users in our private users in Northland. So just giving you a bit of an update around the Auckland Northland speed reviews. So if you remember a few months ago, Waka Katahi came out and engaged with local communities in the far north around getting to understand on 11 corridors around what they think about the current speeds and where their concerns lie. There's some really great feedback came in, and some key themes are listed there that you can see around school children and vulnerable users, around the enforcement of speed limits. It's around driver behaviour, passing opportunities, and the road maintenance. So there's no surprises in there, but it was good to receive a lot of that information. So as part of that, you would have seen over the last couple of weeks some new advertisements coming out talking about speed. It's a new TV ad there. I think it's really good, and we really want to start the conversation with people around having acceptable speeds on our roads for the conditions. And in the new year, you'll see another new marketing campaign come out around Road to Zero and getting people to really focus on what zero really means. So look, I'm really excited about the the campaign that's coming out in the new year. I think I've seen it and heard it about 10 times now, and I still get goosebumps when I see it and hear it. So yeah, I'm really excited about the conversations this will develop. So look, we're going to come out in the new year and consult on all those 11 high-risk corridors, reflecting that whole of network approach to safety. So we'll be talking to you closer to that time next year. Just continuing on the safety.
Sorry, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
David.
So are you, yeah, I've been
Welcome,
on for a while
David.
now, Rick. Yeah. Hey, just going back to the previous slide, are you saying that there's no predetermined decision on the speed limits intended for our highways?
So how the process works, so it's a regulatory process. And
No, sorry, I just asked a yes or no. Is there a predetermined decision on the speed limits on our highways?
No, there's not. That's what the consultation is about. So the consultation will come out with a proposal, and we're asking for people to consult on that. So just moving to safety improvement. So part of the Road to Zero, we've got a number of critical projects that are happening between the Auckland and Whangarei corridor, and we're really focusing on that Whangarei to Wellsford section. So the first section there is the central, and that's the Port Marsden Highway to the north side of the Brynduin. So we're currently working through our detailed design and refining that, and we're having a lot of conversations with the community, with affected communities and the landowners around Ruakaka and Waipu about how the project will progress, and we're getting some really good feedback in terms of that. We started some surveying, some geotech work, and ecological and other investigative works are beginning, and they'll probably start just before Christmas or probably in the new year. And we're sort of looking at wider centre lines and sections of flexible medium barriers and safety barriers near the Ruakaka schools. That's where the work will first commence. Moving to the next section, which is what we call the southern section, which is between the Brynduins and Tahana. So we're refining and developing the detailed design at the moment. It's progressing well. We've had some initial conversations with our key stakeholders, and we're planning some early works in 2022. And once again, it's including wider centre lines and sections of flex and medium barrier, and also improved line marking and signage. The northern section, which is the bit from Whangarei through to Port Marsden Highway. So as you are well aware, the government decided not to proceed with the 4-laning of that highway. So we've picked up a lot of that information that was done to date, and we're looking to see what safety improvements or online safety improvements we can do to improve that section of highway from a safety perspective. There's a lot of work being undertaken by KiwiRail on the line out to Marsden. So they need to complete their next stage of work to confirm their scope before we can complete our business case and to see the funding that is available to do this work. So we're looking at March before we get a real clear understanding on what that scope looks like. And then just lastly, Dome Valley. So we're continuing our work through Dome Valley there. I guess you haven't travelled on it for the last 100 days or so, but it's going really well. We're looking for it to be completed early next year. And the works at the north end of the valley just currently being rescoped to I guess, to improve some of the outcomes that we're seeking there. And lastly, Chair, just an update on Loop Road. So you may have seen just recently some final road surfacing work needs to be done, and we've currently started some of that work doing it at night, and we're looking to try and do as much as we can before Christmas, but the remainder of it will be carried out early in the new year. But we did have a few challenges with that pavement there, and we've spent quite a bit of time to understand what the cause of those challenges were to make sure we get it right going forward. So happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve. Very good update and very comprehensive. Before I take any questions, we do have another meeting at 11, and it's we've got 14 minutes. So happy to take questions, and then we've got our final item on the dates. You weren't aware of what we're discussing, David, but we'll talk about it briefly. So if we have any questions for Steve, I see Anne's hand up. We've got 10 minutes for questions. Anne, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just an ancillary question to the one raised by my colleague. And Steve, it's not my intention to chuck you under the bus, but I would like some clarity. Yesterday morning, you phoned me and you said at today's meeting, the Waka Katahi would be talking about the possibility of introducing mandatory 80-kilometre speed limits on all sections of Northland State Highway network that were not covered by a centre barrier. My colleague just asked you if there was any predetermined position on speed and you said no. So I'd just like some clarity around that conversation, please.
Sure. So how this works is that with any consultation, we go through an engagement phase, we listen to the communities, we then do a desktop review based on the appropriate speed for the road and also taking the feedback from the communities. We then create a proposal, of which I mentioned that there'll be large sections of state highway which may go to 80 kilometres an hour, and then we'll go out and consult on that. So as with any consultation, it's an opportunity for public to give their feedback, of which we will take into account when the final decisions are made. So we're really engaging really closely with the community. We're talking with iwi leaders to make sure that we engage closely with all Northlanders around their thoughts in terms of the proposal.
Ancillary question, can I ask if this approach, subject to consultation, has been rolled out nationally, or is this something that's unique to Northland?
It has been rolled out. So this is part of the Road to Zero strategy, where we, you would have seen in your pack, there's the Road to Zero strategy in terms of driver behaviour and education. It's around safety of vehicles. It's around speed and infrastructure. So in Northland, it's a two-pronged approach, looking at safety improvements through infrastructure, and we've got some fantastic work which I've just talked about. Between Wellsford and Whangarei. We've also got State Highway 10, Pakaraka to Kaio, which a significant amount of money has been invested in terms of infrastructure. But there's also having the right speeds, because we do know that if you have the right speeds, if someone does make a mistake, you've got more chance of walking away from that incident. This is a national strategy. There's been a number of corridors throughout New Zealand which have had this review completed and speed limits changed to reflect that. I think probably one of the most recent would be State Highway 5 down Taranaki here, which has been in the media quite a bit, so you may have seen that one. So it's definitely happening nationally.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, if my colleagues look at page 41 of the agenda, and they will see that those 11 corridors, with one exception, is the entire state highway network of certainly the far north, and by looking at that, that looks like Northland. And I have some real concerns that I would like the opportunity to have a conversation about before we go out public and start suggesting that we're going to mandatory raise the speed limit to 80 kilometres across entire Northland. I think that we can all accept that lowering the speed limit does reduce the road toll. But I am concerned about this being taken in isolation from a significant number of other considerations that I would like the opportunity to discuss as a committee. And I don't have time for it now. And I'm uncomfortable that we never seem to have enough time to have these conversations. And it's not my intention to come on these meetings and be combative, because Steve's the messenger. But we need to have a Northland conversation around the implications of some of the decisions that are being made in Wellington, and the opportunity for this committee, who are the democratically elected representatives of this region, to articulate their concerns ahead of having to go out and constantly fight fires. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, Anne, thank you for that. I think that will be addressed when I talk about the meeting dates and the workshops, and we can certainly put that on our next one, next on our first workshop.
Mr. Chair, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. David.
Sorry. Hi, thanks. Thank you. I won't hold this up. I appreciate that you've got time, and I'm also on another meeting. But I wanted to just, I've been instructed to reflect the Kaipara District Council concern about any suggestion that a blanket approach be taken to the speed limits in the Kaipara District. And as alluded to by Anne previously, there are other solutions, including actually fixing the highways and making them safer. And I don't want it to be, this is an effort to not need to maintain our roads to the standard that we would expect. And I ask that that be included in the future agenda, and I support my other councillor in that. Thank you.
Okay, now, Steve, David wasn't there at the beginning, so unless there's any further questions, I'll address that in item 6.3, David, so that that'll come clear then. In terms of your consultation with me, emissions reductions on page 40, I think it was, 38, yeah. So I'm very keen to catch up about that. Thank you. Very, very relevant topic to Northland Regional Council, and you obviously are aware that electric buses are in our future plans as well. Very keen to talk about that. On a personal level, I want to thank you as a elected member for the consultation going in Waipu and Ruakaka. Your frontline men have put up with a lot of good conversations. I feel that's probably the best way to describe it. So they're doing a great job out there, and please pass that on to them. It's a tricky one and interesting, even though we have said that is not the immediate area that was being addressed. That Waipu Ruakaka area was more bottom of the Brendu and so forth. So enough said on that. I think I've answered all those. Unless there's any other questions, I would like to take that report as any comment. Sorry, anybody not in favour of accepting that report? No. So I'm going on to item 6.3, which is the final item, 45, the dates. And David, this is, I'll reiterate what I said at the very beginning. After contacting the elected members, the staff of the RTC, and talking to Waka Katahi, I am suggesting the following proposal: that we have 4 meetings next year, that we meet in March, June, September, and December. That prior to that meeting, we have a workshop on the March, June, and September meeting, and December meeting is a meeting only. And in that workshop, we have already 3 agenda items for the first one, and I would assume we would add the 80-kilometre discussion as well for that meeting. So that would follow, and we have not got a date for those meetings. We just would like the RTC to, I gave them, David, I mentioned at the beginning, so they could have think about it over the previous or the following hour and a half. So what I'm proposing now is that we come back to you with some dates for 4 meetings for next year, preceded by a workshop on 3 of them. And the workshop effectively is to discuss these items that we are not getting through, but it is also strategically based on looking at the RTC into the following year and into the future. So that is the proposal I'm putting forward, and we can have a brief discussion if there's any comments. Otherwise, that is what I am proposing, and I would like the RTC to accept. Greg.
Yep, I just wanted to second that.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
And thank you.
And just while I'm on here, I've had some people concerned about the new flash speeding ad that's on the TV. That there's a guy on one side of the road talking to kids with a pushchair on the other side of a busy road. There's safety fencing in the road corridor, standing under a speed restriction sign, which you can't see how fast it is. But clearly, if there's fencing into the road reserve, it would be a very restricted speed zone anyway. And there's a school bus that goes speeding past at the so-called high speed. So that's just some things for you to have a look at, Steve. This person just thinks that it should be much more accurate and represent what you do, because only a village idiot stands on one side of the road calling to kids on the other side. And that's just feedback. But I actually agree with it too.
Thank you. Anne.
If we didn't have village idiots, Darwin wouldn't have a theory about turning in his grave, Councillor Martin. I actually really like this idea. I've become increasingly frustrated with this committee, and that's not a reflection on any of you lovely people. But for reasons that escape me, NRC has allocated an hour and a half, and we rush through these things like a Gatling gun, and we don't have time to have meaningful conversations and debate about any of the burning issues for Northland. So I'm really supportive of the principle, but I'm also mindful that all councils will have by now adopted their formal meeting calendars for the following year. So I would ask that whoever sets up the meeting times does need to liaise with the officers in each person's individual council to make sure that there aren't clashes, and we can move forward with some really good strategy and fighting for the needs of the people of Northland. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. And we're very conscious of working with the calendars have been set, and we've spoken briefly about it yesterday. We are hoping we can negotiate that with those 4 dates. Victoria is there, and also Laura. So I have moved that. Greg has seconded it. Is there anybody against the motion? So your hand's still up, Anne, but I gather you're for it. So thank you.
I support your Chair. I support what you've just said, even though I've only had a minute to digest it. I think that's great, because I agree with the other councillors that some of the stuff that we could discuss in a workshop environment that doesn't require the attendance of all the support staff would be a chance for us to talk about the strategy rather than individual policies like we are currently. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm very conscious it's almost 11. We've got a minute left. We are winding up the meeting. I want to thank you all for your attendance. Once again, David, you weren't there. We welcome Victoria as the replacement for Tony. So Victoria is our new RTC lead. So if you haven't, you know David, yes, of course you do. Thank you. So I will now hand it over to Laura to do the closing karakia. Thank you, Laura.
Thanks, Rick. Una hia ki te uru tapanui, kia vātia, kia māmā, te ngāko, te tinana, te warua I te ara tangata. Kuia rā I rongo, whakairia ake ki runga. Kia tina, huie tai kie.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Laura. Thank you. And are we going straight on to the next meeting, Laura, or are we having a break?
We'll jump straight on because we've got different